My name is Ryan Mercer, and for 12 years I lived under the illusion that I had everything a man could ask for: a stable career, 2 beautiful children, and a wife who turned heads wherever we went. To the outside world, we were the picture of suburban success, the kind of family you see on holiday postcards or smiling in glossy brochures for gated communities. But behind the doors of our upscale home in Boise, Idaho, the foundation of our marriage was rotting beneath a polished surface. Madison, my wife, was stunning, no doubt. She had this way of commanding every room she entered without saying much, just a toss of her honey blonde hair or a glance through her perfectly done lashes. I met her in college, back when I was an engineering major and she was studying marketing. She always had grand plans: the big house, the luxury car, and a life filled with what we deserve. At first I mistook her ambition for partnership. I thought we were building something together. The first few years of our marriage were fine, even happy. We bought a modest house in a quiet neighborhood. I took a job with a local construction firm, and Madison started climbing the ladder at a boutique advertising agency. Then came our first child, Emily, followed 2 years later by Zach. I remember the day Emily was born, the way Madison looked at me like we had just created magic. I believed her then. I believed in everything: the marriage, the kids, the life. But things began to change once Madison's career took off. Her agency merged with a national firm, and overnight she became an executive. New clothes, late-night meetings, business trips that stretched just a little longer than necessary. And me, I was still working 9 to 6, coming home covered in dust and concrete, making sure the house was clean and dinner was on the table because Madison was too tired from work. I didn't complain. I loved her. I loved our kids. I thought this was just a phase, but the signs were there. Little things at first: a glance at her phone when a message popped up, and her immediate nervous swipe to clear the screen, the way she never let it leave her side, not even in the shower, how her patience thinned whenever I asked about her day. I once found a receipt for a spa day in Seattle, but she had told me she was at a client meeting in Portland that same weekend. When I asked her about it, she brushed it off, claiming it was a gift from her assistant, and I, the fool I was, believed her. I wasn't ready to accept that something was wrong. I'd always been the kind of guy who gave people the benefit of the doubt. Madison knew that. She banked on it. Then came the breaking point. It was a Thursday evening. I'd come home early from work, a project got pushed, and I figured I'd surprise Madison and the kids with takeout from their favorite Thai place. The house was quiet when I walked in. No kids running around, no Madison in sight. I thought maybe they were out shopping or at a friend's house, but then I heard laughter from upstairs, a man's voice, and Madison's, laughing in that way I hadn't heard in years. My gut twisted. I climbed the stairs slowly, each step heavier than the last. The door to our bedroom was closed but not locked. When I pushed it open, I caught just enough to understand what was happening. She was in our bed, with someone else, a man I didn't recognize, shirtless, relaxed, and clearly comfortable in my home. Madison didn't scream. She didn't cry or apologize. She didn't even act surprised. She just sat up, looked me dead in the eyes and said, "I didn't think you'd be home this early." That was it. No "I'm sorry," no tears, no guilt, just irritation, as if I had ruined her evening. I turned around and walked out of the room, down the stairs, out the door. I got in my truck and drove aimlessly for an hour. I wasn't angry, not yet. I was hollow, numb, the kind of numb you feel when your reality unravels right in front of you. But it wasn't over, not even close, because what came next would make that betrayal look like a paper cut compared to the knife she would drive into my back. And the revenge I planned, it would be the last thing Madison ever saw coming. The weeks rolled by like clockwork. I spent my days at the mechanic shop, pulling double shifts, while Evelyn floated in and out of our lives like a celebrity in a hotel lobby, present but distant. She had grown colder. There were no more affectionate goodnights, no casual touches, and certainly no warmth in her gaze. But I had learned to ignore it, convincing myself that maybe stress, hormones, or fatigue were to blame. Then came an unexpected invitation, a charity gala hosted by Evelyn's workplace. She had never invited me to any of her corporate functions before. Her social life was her own little world, sealed off from our home life, and she preferred to keep it that way. So when she casually mentioned I should rent a suit and be ready by 6 p.m. Saturday, I blinked at her in disbelief. "You want me to go with you?" I asked, half joking. She rolled her eyes, sipping on her coffee. "It's just one night, Nolan. They want families to come. Optics matter." I didn't argue. I hadn't worn a proper suit in years, but I rented one from a local boutique, pressed and tailored just enough to make me look less like a grease monkey and more like someone who belonged. That evening, as I stood in front of the mirror fixing my collar, I caught a glimpse of myself, a man trying too hard to fit into a world that never truly invited him in. But I was doing it for her, for the kids, for the marriage I thought still had a fighting chance. Evelyn descended the stairs wearing a sapphire blue gown that hugged her like it had been poured on. She looked stunning, elegant, powerful, and for a fleeting second I remembered why I had fallen in love with her in the first place. "You clean up okay?" she said flatly, as she grabbed her clutch. "Thanks," I mumbled, offering her my arm. She ignored it and walked straight to the car. The venue was upscale, an art gallery in downtown Providence Hills. Everything smelled of polished marble, money, and quiet judgment. Evelyn slid seamlessly into her element, greeting co-workers with effortless charm, smiling her practiced smile. I, on the other hand, clung to the bar like it was a life raft, sipping soda and scanning the room for anyone remotely relatable. Then I saw him, tall, handsome, and dressed in a navy suit that probably cost more than my car. His name was Derek Landon. I knew him because Evelyn had once accidentally mentioned him in passing, referring to him as the senior VP with the Range Rover. The way she laughed at his jokes, how her body leaned just a little too far into his personal space, how his hand brushed the small of her back, it all triggered something in me I hadn't felt in years, that gut-twisting suspicion that something was terribly wrong. I watched from across the room, a silent witness to my own humiliation. They were too familiar, too intimate, as if the presence of others didn't matter. At one point, Evelyn caught me staring. Her smile faltered, then returned sharper, like a blade. She whispered something to Derek, and they both chuckled. That laugh, it burned like acid. I wanted to walk over, to confront them, but I didn't. I wasn't ready, not yet. Instead, I excused myself to the restroom, splashed cold water on my face, and looked into the mirror at a man unraveling. When I returned, Evelyn was gone. I scanned the crowd, then checked my phone. Nothing. I walked the hallways, then stepped outside. That's when I saw them, her and Derek, standing near the valet, too close for comfort. Their silhouettes were blurred by the soft glow of the street lamp, but I saw enough. His hand lingered on her hip. Her lips parted as she whispered something, and then without shame they kissed. Not a friendly peck, not a drunken accident, a deliberate, intimate kiss that cut through me like a blade. I turned away before they could see me. My chest tightened, my breath shallow. I walked down the sidewalk in a daze, the sounds of laughter and music echoing behind me like a cruel joke. When I got home that night, Evelyn returned 2 hours later. She didn't bother explaining where she'd been. She just went upstairs, humming to herself like nothing had happened, and I, the fool, lay on the couch staring at the ceiling, every beat of my heart asking the same question, why? But deep down I already knew the answer. The silence in our home after that night grew heavier. It wasn't the kind of silence that brings peace. It was the kind that suffocates you slowly. Evelyn acted as though nothing had happened. She still packed the kids' lunches, scrolled through her phone at dinner, and left the house early for meetings. But I knew, and I was done pretending. The image of that kiss haunted me. I told myself it might have been a moment of weakness, maybe something she regretted. But Evelyn didn't look like a woman burdened by guilt. She looked relieved, like something inside her had been set free. I tried to focus on my kids. Jamie had a science fair coming up and kept asking for help with his volcano project. Lily, barely 6, clung to me like she sensed something wasn't right, and I held them close every chance I got, even though something had begun eating at me, a whisper in the back of my mind that I didn't want to believe. One day while driving Jamie to school, I caught his reflection in the rearview mirror. His green eyes, bright and curious, didn't match mine. Neither did Lily's. She had dimples like Evelyn, but none of my features, not even a shade. I knew genetics could be odd sometimes, but I couldn't shake the feeling. That whisper turned into a roar. I tried to ignore it for days, but it gnawed at me, twisting my stomach, clawing at my peace. Until finally, I did something I never imagined I would. I bought 2 home DNA test kits, one for Jamie, one for Lily. I told Evelyn it was for a school project. She didn't even raise an eyebrow. She barely listened. "Whatever," she said, brushing past me on her way to the gym. Jamie and Lily thought it was a fun little game. They swabbed their cheeks and laughed when I told them not to eat candy until it was done. I mailed the tests the next morning with shaking hands. Then I waited. The results came in exactly 11 days later. I remember the moment I opened the email like a scene playing in slow motion. I sat in the break room at the garage, my lunch untouched. My thumb hovered over the screen. I tapped it. Probability of paternity, 0.00%. For Jamie, then again for Lily. Both of them, not mine. I felt the ground shift beneath me. My lungs forgot how to breathe. My fingers trembled as I locked my phone and slid it into my pocket, staring blankly at the floor. My world, my children, weren't my blood. Everything I thought I had built, the life I had sacrificed for, was a lie. I went home early that day. Evelyn wasn't there, of course. She was working late, which now meant anything but work. I sat at the kitchen table staring at framed photos on the wall. Birthday parties, beach trips, Christmas mornings, and for the first time, I saw them for what they really were. False memories, paintings of a life that had never truly existed. That night, when Evelyn walked through the door, humming and dropping her keys on the counter, I didn't yell. I didn't throw anything. I simply said, "We need to talk." She sighed dramatically, tossed her purse on the stool, and leaned against the fridge like she had better things to do. "What now, Nolan?" I stood. My voice was calm, too calm. "I got DNA tests." That got her attention. She blinked. "What did you just say?" "I tested Jamie and Lily. They're not mine." Her face froze. Then came the lie, quick and rehearsed. "That's ridiculous. DNA tests aren't accurate. Those kits are garbage. You must have done it wrong." I double-checked. I read the instructions twice. I even sent them in separate days to make sure. Her voice rose. "How dare you question me like that? After everything I've done for this family." I almost laughed. The audacity of it. "Everything you did." Evelyn's mask began to crack. Her eyes darted, searching for control she no longer had. "It was a mistake. One time, I was lonely. You were always working. You were boring. Twice, Evelyn," I said, holding up 2 fingers. "2 kids. That's not one mistake. That's years of lying." She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Just silence. The same silence I'd lived in for years, now finally hers to bear. "I want a divorce," I said simply. She scoffed. "You're being dramatic." "No, I'm being clear. The house isn't yours. I paid for it. The kids," I swallowed, "they're not legally mine. You're on your own now." For the first time, I saw fear in her eyes. Not guilt, not regret, just fear of losing her cushy life. "You'll regret this," she whispered, her voice like poison. I turned away. "Not as much as I regret ever trusting you." The house was silent after that night. Not the heavy silence of tension, but a clean, sharp stillness. Evelyn moved into the guest room and barely looked at me. The kids, I mean Jamie and Lily, they still called me Dad, still hugged me before bed, and I let them. Not for Evelyn's sake, but for theirs. They were innocent in all this, even if they weren't mine. But deep down, I was already grieving. Not just the loss of a family, but the realization that I had spent over a decade living in someone else's lie. I filed for divorce the next morning. My attorney, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Harper, looked over the paperwork with a raised brow. "She's going to fight dirty," she warned. "Women like that, they don't lose gracefully." I nodded. "I'm not here to win a fight, but it might get ugly first." And she was right. The moment Evelyn was served the papers, she lost whatever composure she had left. She stormed into the garage where I worked, mascara smudged, heels clacking across the concrete. "You think you can just leave me like this?" she spat in front of my co-workers. "After everything I gave you?" I didn't flinch. "You didn't give me a marriage. You gave me a script to read while you played a double life." She scoffed and threw her hands in the air. "Fine. You want a war? You'll get one." I didn't respond. I just wiped my hands on a rag and went back to work. Weeks passed. The divorce moved forward. The DNA results were officially entered into court. I filed to revoke paternity rights, which also meant I wouldn't be financially responsible for child support. Evelyn screamed in court that I was abandoning our children, but the judge, an older man with tired eyes, shook his head. "These children are not biologically yours. The mother concealed this from you. Legally, you have no obligation." Evelyn broke down sobbing, loud enough for the courtroom to echo. "But me, I just sat there. I wasn't celebrating. I wasn't even angry anymore. I was numb but finally free. I signed over custody entirely to her. Not because I didn't love Jamie and Lily, but because dragging them through a courtroom fight would have only hurt them more. And the truth was, I wasn't their real father. I had no right to pull them back and forth like pawns. I left them with their mother, the woman who brought them into this world, and I walked away. I moved out of the house 2 weeks later. Harper had helped me protect my assets, so Evelyn wasn't walking away with my home, savings or retirement. But she did get what she earned, a modest apartment, no alimony, and full custody of 2 children she would have to raise without the safety net she once took for granted. I rented a small but clean place on the edge of town, quiet neighborhood, good coffee shop 2 blocks down, no more pretending, no more walking on eggshells, just me. For the first time in a long time, I had space to breathe, but even then I wasn't satisfied, not yet, because Evelyn still had no idea that her friend, the man she cheated with, wasn't just some fling. He was someone I knew, and someone I had plans for. His name was Ryan Ellison, a mutual friend from years ago, someone I once played poker with on Saturday nights, while our wives laughed over wine in the next room. He was the kind of guy who always had a story, charming, confident, slick, too slick. I hadn't suspected him at first. He'd moved to another state years ago, or so I thought, but a week after the divorce finalized, Harper handed me a file. She slid it across the table like it was nothing, but the weight of it hit me like a truck. I pulled Evelyn's phone records. "You sure you want to know?" she asked. I didn't answer. I just opened it. Dozens of calls, late-night texts, photos, voice messages, all from one number, Ryan's. And the timestamps? They went back nearly 8 years. It wasn't just a fling. It wasn't even a double life. It was a second relationship running parallel to my marriage, all while I paid the bills and raised someone else's kids like they were my own. I stared at the file for a long time, not in shock, not in heartbreak, but in calculation. Ryan had just moved back to town. Harper confirmed it. He was working as a mid-level exec for a regional construction firm. Still smug, still smooth-talking, still hiding behind that grin that once fooled me into thinking we were friends. I didn't go to his house. I didn't call or message him. Instead, I made a phone call to someone else. "Dean, it's Alex. You still doing freelance IT work?" "Yeah, man. You finally need a favor. Big one." Dean and I had been friends since high school. He owed me after I covered for him years ago when he wrecked my truck and I took the heat with my old man. He worked cybersecurity now, the kind of guy who could find a trail in digital smoke. "I need you to find anything you can on a guy named Ryan Ellison. Work stuff, personal stuff, financial records, the works." Dean let out a low whistle. "That bad? Worse." He didn't ask more questions. 2 days later, he dropped off a USB drive with a single sentence: "This guy is dirtier than a septic tank." Ryan had falsified his job application, lied about his previous employment. He listed fake leadership roles, used a friend as a reference, and even adjusted his credit reports to appear more stable. Everything he had was built on a stack of cards, and all it would take was the right wind to bring it crashing down, and I was that wind. But I didn't want to destroy him quietly. No, that wasn't enough. I wanted him to feel it. Every betrayal, every lie, every time he stepped into my home like it was his. I wanted him to lose what he thought he had finally won. And that's when the idea hit me. A plan so perfect, it practically wrote itself. It started with a message. A simple, friendly email sent from a dummy account. Just a few lines, nothing fancy. "Hi Ryan, I've been following your firm's development projects and was impressed with your recent work on the Bayfront property. We're a private investor group looking to expand in the Midwest and would love to speak with someone from your team. Are you available to meet next week?" Attached was a fake business card. Cliff Westgate, Acquisitions Director, Lancer Equity Partners. A logo designed on Canva, a LinkedIn profile that looked just real enough. Ryan responded in less than 3 hours. Of course he did. A man like Ryan couldn't resist the smell of money, especially when it came wrapped in flattery and fake promises. He replied, eager and polite, "Would love to discuss. I've got some exciting concepts in development that might align well with your investment strategy." It was almost too easy. I booked a private room at a high-end steakhouse in the city, reserved it under the fake name, told him to dress sharp, we'd be meeting with senior partners after appetizers. Harper helped prep the backstory. She loved this part, turning our revenge into performance art. The night arrived. I sat 2 tables away, hidden behind a partition, a pair of sunglasses and a fake beard covering just enough of my face to pass unnoticed. Harper sat across from me, pretending to be someone's disinterested wife. She sipped her wine and whispered updates as Ryan strutted into the room like a man about to make his big break. He looked good. Tailored blazer, polished shoes, the kind of smug energy that came with thinking he was finally about to cash in on all his sins. He waited 15 minutes, then 20. No one showed. He ordered a drink too, actually, and started scrolling his phone, trying to keep cool. But the room stayed empty, and right when he started to squirm, his email dinged. We've reviewed your background more closely, and unfortunately, some discrepancies have raised concern. Thank you for your time. That was it. 1 sentence, but it would be enough to rattle him, because the next day I sent another email, this time from his employer. Ryan, we've received troubling information regarding your application and prior work history. You are hereby suspended pending investigation. Dean had helped me compile a tidy folder of everything Ryan had falsified, old resumes, fake titles, doctored reference letters. All of it was sent anonymously to the head of HR at his company. By the end of the week, Ryan was out, not fired, just under review. But in his world, that was enough to burn bridges. Word spread, a few whispers here, a rumor there. Soon nobody in town wanted to touch him. And with his reputation spiraling, I knew it was time to pull the final thread. The invitation arrived 2 weeks later. It was cream-colored, embossed with gold leaf, and smelled faintly of expensive perfume. A ridiculous flourish, just like her. Evelyn Summers and Ryan Lancaster cordially invite you. It began, a destination wedding in Asheville, mountain resort, candlelit vows, vineyard reception, the works. I stared at the RSVP card for a full minute before setting it down on my desk. Then I laughed, really laughed, for the first time in months. There it was. Her dream, the ceremony she used to describe to me when we were still married. How she wanted a fall backdrop, twinkling lights, the kind of ceremony that made people cry. She got it all, but this time I had something of my own. Because what Evelyn didn't know was that Ryan wasn't just out of work. He was under federal investigation. That dummy corporation I used to bait him, it was also used to flag him for insider manipulation. Dean had helped plant the right triggers, enough for an SEC inquiry to open quietly. He'd fumbled an NDA on a public project, leaked confidential design plans to a shadow investor group, which conveniently didn't exist. By the time his lawyer realized the documents had been falsified, it was too late. His license was being questioned, his past contracts scrutinized, and his finances cracking under the weight of legal bills and collapsing credibility. But Ryan, ever the showman, hadn't told Evelyn, not yet, which made their wedding the perfect place to let the truth unravel. I didn't respond to the RSVP, didn't need to. I had another plan. The night before the ceremony, I made one final call to Harper. "Are you sure about this?" she asked. "Once you show up there, there's no turning back." "I've never been more sure," I said. "It's time they both see what it feels like to lose everything in front of everyone." She didn't try to stop me. She just said, "Then do it clean. Make sure it hurts." The wedding venue was a restored vineyard estate, tucked in the Blue Ridge Mountains, gated, private, lush with flowers and money. I arrived early, dressed in a charcoal suit and tie, the same one I wore the day Evelyn filed for divorce. Fitting in a way. One ending, one beginning. Guests milled about, sipping wine, laughing, dressed in autumn shades. No one noticed me, until I walked through the front archway. Evelyn saw me first. She froze, her mouth open slightly, her bouquet trembling just a bit in her grip. Her perfect makeup couldn't hide the fear crawling up her spine. "Alex," she said, like a ghost had appeared. I didn't smile, didn't blink. "Don't worry," I said calmly. "I'm not here to ruin your vows." She blinked rapidly, looking for Ryan, scanning the crowd, but I beat her to it. I stepped aside, and from the far end of the terrace, 2 men in dark suits, government issue, approached the groom. They spoke softly but firm, pulled him aside. Guests paused. Whispers followed. Evelyn rushed toward them in her gown, demanding answers, and I just stood there, watching as Ryan's face drained of color, as Evelyn realized her groom wasn't just unemployed, he was under indictment, as the whispers turned into gasps, and as the day she had planned for so long dissolved into a public unraveling. My revenge wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It was a quiet detonation, one that left them both exposed, alone and humiliated, just like they had done to me. Chaos doesn't always come with sirens. Sometimes it arrives in slow motion, whispered rumors, shocked glances, and the sound of expensive champagne flutes being quietly set down. Ryan stood like a deer in headlights as the two agents led him toward the side entrance of the vineyard estate. He wasn't handcuffed, not yet, but the implications were clear. And Evelyn, poor Evelyn, still stood frozen in the middle of the ceremony space, her pristine white gown now looking like a cruel costume. She looked around for someone, anyone, to explain what had just happened. Her eyes found me again. "You did this," she hissed, stomping toward me. "I didn't move. I gave you everything," she snapped. "I gave you years of my life. You gave me betrayal," I replied evenly, "and I gave you a mirror." She looked like she wanted to slap me. Her hands balled into fists. Her breath trembled. "You ruined my wedding." "No," I said. "You ruined your own future, the day you chose him." I just held up the spotlight. She opened her mouth again, but nothing came. Not a scream, not a threat, not even an apology. Just air, like the wind had been knocked from her entirely. The wedding planner tried to regain order. Someone asked if the reception would still continue. A few guests gathered their coats, awkwardly avoiding eye contact. No music played, no toasts were raised, no cake was cut. The party was over before it ever began. That night, I sat in a quiet bar down the mountain slope, sipping a neat bourbon, while Dean texted me updates. Ryan had posted bail, but the press got wind of the investigation. His name was trending, not for marriage, but for misconduct. He'd likely lose his engineering license. Civil fraud was on the table. Evelyn, according to Dean, had checked into a hotel under her maiden name. Whatever dream life she had imagined for herself was unraveling, thread by thread. I should have felt triumphant. Instead, I felt clean, not happy, not vindicated, just free. For the first time in years, my life was mine again. No lies, no manipulation, no one else dictating the worth of my name. And as I looked out over the quiet valley, where their perfect wedding had burned to ash, I realized something. Revenge wasn't about winning. It was about ending the game, on your own terms. A week passed. The media storm died down, but the dust in my mind hadn't settled. I went back to my usual life, or at least the version of it that was left behind after Evelyn. Mornings were quiet again. My coffee tasted less bitter. The silence no longer reminded me of the emptiness she once left. It reminded me of peace. Then one afternoon, a courier knocked on my apartment door. A manila envelope, no return address. I stared at it for a long time before tearing it open. Inside was a handwritten letter. The handwriting was hers, clean, measured, just like the woman herself. "Alex, I suppose you're expecting apologies, maybe even excuses. I don't have either. What I did to you was cruel. I see that now, not just the betrayal, but how deeply I took advantage of your kindness. I don't know if you'll believe this, but there were moments I loved you before everything got too complicated. Ryan was supposed to be a mistake, just a fling. But somewhere along the line, I convinced myself you were holding me back. Now I see, you were the only one who ever stood still when everything else was spinning. I don't deserve forgiveness, but I wanted you to know. I'm sorry for everything, Evelyn." I folded the letter once and slid it into the back of a drawer. I didn't throw it away, not because I forgave her, but because it reminded me of the chapter I had finally closed. She had lost more than I ever tried to take from her. A few days later, Dean and I grabbed lunch. We didn't talk about Evelyn or Ryan much, just work, baseball, and how weird it was to finally breathe freely. "Think you'll start dating again?" he asked, half joking. I gave him a quiet smile. "Eventually, but this time I'll know what to look for." He raised a glass, to being fooled once and never again. I clinked mine against his, to clean starts. Back at home, I unpacked a box that had been sitting in my closet for over a year. Inside were old photos, me and Evelyn from our first road trip, me with her parents, birthday cards, love notes. I didn't burn them. I didn't need to. I simply put them away, because closure isn't a fire, it's a lock, and once you've turned the key, the door stays shut. A year had passed since the day I walked away from Evelyn, and the version of myself that tolerated her lies. 12 months of rebuilding, not just my career or my finances, but my identity. The betrayal had cut deep, yes, but I realized something. Scars are proof that you survived. They don't disappear, but they stop hurting after a while. I'd moved to a new apartment overlooking the river. Nothing extravagant, just peace, the kind that doesn't need a price tag. One evening, I received a call from the lawyer who had helped me during the fallout with Evelyn. "Alex, you might want to know, Ryan is being investigated for fraud tied to his hedge fund. SEC's crawling all over him." I didn't laugh, didn't gloat, just nodded and said thanks. Some revenge doesn't come with fireworks. Sometimes it shows up quietly, in the form of natural consequences. Evelyn's name appeared in the papers again. Not for a wedding or charity gala, but for testifying in a white-collar trial. She was broke, living in a rental apartment miles outside the city, alone, and Ryan, well, prison was a different kind of gated community than the one he used to brag about. Funny how the world turns. One Saturday morning, I visited my parents. Mum brought out a photo album from my college days. "You were always too kind for your own good," she said, looking at a picture of me and Evelyn. "I wasn't kind," I corrected her. "I was blind. There's a difference." She smiled softly. "Not anymore. I did fall in love again eventually, slowly, cautiously, the kind of love that doesn't arrive in a whirlwind but builds like a foundation, strong, deliberate, honest." She knew about my past, not in full detail, but enough, and she never pitied me. She respected the man I'd become, because I had earned my place, not just in the world, but in my own story. Looking back, I don't wish it hadn't happened. Strange, right? But betrayal has a way of forcing growth. It teaches you who you are when everything falls apart. It sharpens your vision, your voice, your values. So to Evelyn, if you ever read this, I don't hate you anymore, but I don't miss you either. You showed me who I never want to be again, and for that, I'm finally grateful. Alex Mercer.